21. Black R&B legends who ruined their careers in seconds. 21 black R&B legends had it all: platinum records, screaming fans, world tours, then watched their empires collapse in a matter of seconds. One high-speed chase, one overdose, one handcuffed mugshot, one horrific scandal that turned heroes into headlines and idols into warnings. These aren't just stories of fame and failure. They're X-rays of how fast the world will love you and how much faster it will bury you. Tonight, we're ripping the mask off the glitter. If you're ready to see how 21 icons destroyed everything in a single moment, hit subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence, and let's go. Hank Ballard. Hank Ballard's story shows how a black R&B legend can help invent a musical revolution and still see his career crumble in what feels like a single brutal moment. In the 1950s, he shocked radio with Work With Me, Annie, then shaped the future of pop culture by writing and recording the original version of The Twist. But when Chubby Checker's cleaner, more marketable cover exploded worldwide, the man who lit the fuse got left standing in the shadows. Bitterness followed him into the 1960s, and the gap between what he created and what he received slowly poisoned his relationship with the industry. As tastes changed and new stars arrived, Ballard leaned harder into the nightlife that had once seemed like a reward for success. Club after club, city after city, he chased relief in heroin, marijuana, and endless late nights instead of contracts, rehearsal, and radio promotion. His band grew frustrated, his label lost patience, and his reputation shifted from pioneering hitmaker to unreliable risk. In a way, his fall came the instant he let resentment steer his choices instead of his instincts as a songwriter. Do you think the industry truly robbed Hank Ballard? Or did his own decisions finally close the door for good? That inner collapse set the stage for the public one that followed. The moment everything broke open was a simple traffic stop in Detroit that uncovered drugs and paraphernalia in his car. Headlines moved faster than his music, and soon labels, promoters, and stations stepped away. One arrest did not erase his genius, but it froze his image as another troubled black star, making a genuine comeback almost impossible. Hank Ballard's legacy proves how a few seconds on the roadside can cement a story that overshadows a lifetime of innovation for future generations. Ike Turner. Ike Turner's name once meant electricity on stage. As bandleader, producer, and architect of the Ike and Tina Turner Revue, he helped shape early rock and R&B with a sound that packed clubs in the 1960s. From A Fool in Love to long tours, he was praised as a musical mastermind who discovered talent and built bands. Behind that image of genius was a man spiraling into cocaine addiction and a need for control over the woman who lit up the stage beside him, Tina Turner. By the mid-1970s, the violence could no longer stay off stage. Tina later described beatings, terror, and a life lived in fear as Ike's drug use and rage escalated. The breaking point came in July 1976 on the way to a show in Dallas, when a fight ended with Tina fleeing their hotel, bruised and exhausted with almost no money. That decision to walk out did more than end a marriage. It shattered the brand of Ike and Tina, overnight canceling tours and freezing his reputation. Do you think the moment Tina escaped was when Ike's career truly ended, or had he already destroyed it long before that night? From then on, he was no longer seen as a visionary, but as the man she survived. The rest of Ike Turner's life played out as an echo of that collapse. His cocaine addiction led to legal trouble, including a prison sentence for drug offenses in the 1980s, and every comeback was overshadowed by the abuse the world knew. Even when he returned to stages, his legacy was rewritten. In any list of black R&B legends who ruined their careers in seconds, Ike Turner stands as an example of how cruelty behind doors can explode into ruin, wiping away years of achievement in a single story. James Brown. James Brown was more than a star. He was a movement. The godfather of soul rewrote the rules of black music with hits like Papa's Got a Brand New Bag, I Got You, I Feel Good, and Say It Loud. I'm Black and I'm Proud. He stood at the crossroads of R&B, funk, and civil rights, a relentless performer whose stage shows looked like controlled explosions of sweat rhythm and discipline. For decades, his name meant pride, power, and possibility, especially for Black audiences, watching him rise from poverty in the Jim Crow South to global icon status. But by the late 1980s, the pressure age, strained finances, and substance use had turned his life increasingly chaotic. On September 24, 1988, things snapped. Brown stormed into an office building in Augusta, Georgia, angry about someone using a restroom in a space he controlled, waving a shotgun and causing panic. When police arrived, he fled in his pickup truck, triggering a high-speed chase that crossed state lines, ended only when officers disabled his tires and played out in news footage that was replayed across America. In a matter of minutes, the world saw not the sharp-dressed band leader, but a wild, dangerous man dragged from a vehicle in handcuffs. Do you think a lifetime of work can survive an image that shocking? Or does one televised moment rewrite everything? Brown was sentenced to 6 years in prison on charges including failing to stop for police and related offenses, and he served a little over 2 years before being paroled. He continued to perform afterward and remained a legend, but his public image never fully recovered. Interviews, jokes, and headlines often returned to that chase rather than his musical genius. In the story of 21 Black R&B legends who ruined their careers in seconds, James Brown's downfall shows how a few reckless minutes on the road can scar a legacy built over decades. Jackie Wilson. Jackie Wilson's rise looked unstoppable. Nicknamed Mr. Excitement, he blasted through the late 1950s and 1960s with hits like Reet Petite, Lonely Teardrops, and Your Love Keeps Lifting Me Higher and Higher, turning every stage into a storm of spins, slides, and high notes. His voice could leap from silky croon to gospel fire in a heartbeat, and his athletic performing style laid the groundwork for generations of Black male entertainers. For many fans, Jackie Wilson embodied the dream of R&B success. Poor beginnings, a miracle voice, and a spotlight so bright it seemed it would never dim. Behind that shine, however, his life was far less glamorous. Constant touring, chaotic relationships, heavy drinking, smoking, and poor health habits slowly eroded his body. The industry demanded endless energy and new hits, while younger acts appeared pushing him to work even harder to keep his place. By his early 40s, Wilson was still performing like a man half his age, but the wear and tear were catching up to him. Years of stress and neglect were building quietly toward a breaking point that neither he nor his audience could see coming, a moment that would suddenly redefine everything he had built. That moment arrived on September 29, 1975, at the Latin Casino in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Jackie stepped out before more than 2,000 fans, launching into Lonely Teardrops, the song that had once rocketed him to fame. As he reached the line, "My heart is crying," he collapsed from a heart attack and struck his head as he fell. The show stopped, and with it, his career. Wilson never fully recovered and spent his remaining years impaired until his death in 1984. In the story of 21 Black R&B legends who ruined their careers in seconds, Jackie Wilson's tragedy is a stark reminder that sometimes the final mistake is simply a lifetime of giving too much too fast to an unforgiving spotlight. Etta James. Etta James was the kind of singer who could silence a room with one note. From the aching romance of At Last to the gritty soul of Tell Mama, she became one of the defining voices of R&B and blues, a woman whose raw power and vulnerability cut straight through the noise of the 1960s. On stage, she seemed untouchable, fierce, glamorous, and fearless, the kind of artist other singers quietly studied and imitated. But off-stage, years of childhood trauma, industry pressure, and a relentless touring grind left her increasingly dependent on heroin and other drugs just to hold herself together. The same intensity that made her performances unforgettable fed a private storm that she couldn't easily escape. By the early 1970s, that storm had grown too big to hide. Etta's habit was no longer a whispered secret in dressing rooms. It was affecting rehearsals, recordings, and her reliability with labels and promoters. She was only in her mid-30s, but her body showed the strain of addiction and emotional exhaustion. Friends and colleagues worried as she drifted further into a life built around getting high and disappearing between gigs instead of building on the legendary catalog she had already created. The industry still wanted Etta's voice, but it was increasingly unsure if it could trust the woman behind it. Then came the moment that would define her public fall. In Los Angeles, during a police operation in the mid-1970s, officers searched her car and found heroin, marijuana, and syringes. The arrest didn't just land in a small local column. It exploded into headlines in major black and mainstream outlets. Almost overnight, courts ordered her into treatment. Her label dropped her, and promoters quietly removed her name from posters. One arrest crystallized years of struggle into a single damaging image: Etta James in handcuffs. In the larger story of 21 black R&B legends who ruined their careers in seconds, her tragedy shows how a single exposed moment of addiction can slam doors that talent alone can't reopen. David Ruffin. David Ruffin was the golden voice at the heart of the Temptations' classic era, the man who turned "My Girl Ain't Too Proud to Beg" and "I Wish It Would Rain" into timeless declarations of love and longing. Coming from poverty in Mississippi and fighting through racism and hardship, he rose to the absolute peak of Motown stardom, stepping on stage in sharp suits with a presence that felt both humble and larger than life. For a while, it looked as if nothing could touch him. The hits were constant, the crowds were adoring, and his voice seemed carved out of pure emotion. But success changed the atmosphere around Ruffin and inside him. As the group's fame grew, so did his ego and his dependence on cocaine. Money poured in and vanished just as quickly into parties in Detroit and Los Angeles, new cars, and late nights that bled into early mornings. He began missing rehearsals and even full shows, demanding special treatment, and most notoriously asking that the group be billed as David Ruffin and the Temptations. Management and bandmates watched a gifted frontman transform into an unpredictable liability, torn between the work that had made him famous and the habits that were pulling him away from it. The moment everything snapped into focus came when police in Detroit stopped his car and discovered drugs inside. News of the arrest spread quickly and seemed to confirm every whisper about addiction and chaos. Almost simultaneously, his relationship with the Temptations reached its breaking point. He was fired from the group, and Motown's support for him as a solo act never matched the momentum he had once enjoyed. In the broader story of 21 black R&B legends who ruined their careers in seconds, David Ruffin's fall shows how one public bust can crystallize years of private decline, turning a once-in-a-generation voice into a cautionary memory. Frankie Lymon. Frankie Lymon's story is one of the most haunting in the list of 21 black R&B legends who ruined their careers in seconds. At just 13, he became the angelic voice of the teenagers, launching "Why Do Fools Fall in Love" into the charts, and turning a poor kid from Harlem into one of the first black teenage pop idols. His charm, boyish smile, and soaring vocals made him a symbol of youthful innocence in 1950s rock and roll. Yet behind the stage lights, the pressures of sudden fame, exploitation by the music industry, and a chaotic personal life started gnawing at him far too early. By around 15, Frankie had already fallen into heroin addiction. The group splintered his solo releases, failed to match earlier success, and the money he had earned began to disappear into his habit and bad deals. Arrests, unstable relationships, and a constant struggle to stay clean followed him through the early 1960s. He married multiple times, tried different labels, and talked about comebacks, but every chance to rebuild his name was undermined by the same destructive cycle. The talent was still there, but the trust of the industry and the stability he needed to use it were slipping away. The seconds that sealed his fate happened on February 27, 1968. At only 25 years old, Frankie Lymon was found dead on the floor of his grandmother's bathroom in New York, the victim of a heroin overdose. One dose, one relapse erased any hope of the comeback he was planning and froze his image forever as a tragic what-if. In the wider tale of black R&B legends brought down in an instant, Frankie Lyman stands as the heartbreaking example of a career and a life that burned too bright too young and ended before it ever had a chance to fully grow. Sly Stone. Sly Stone's rise was the sound of a new world being born. As the mastermind behind Sly and the Family Stone, he fused gospel soul, rock, and psychedelia into a radical, joyful funk on anthems like Dance to the Music, Everyday People, and Family Affair. His band was black and white, male and female, at a time when that itself was a revolution, and their performances at places like Woodstock turned him into a symbol of possibility. For a few short years between the late 1960s and early 1970s, Sly Stone wasn't just another R&B figure. He was rewriting what black popular music could sound like and who it could speak for. But with that fame came a darker, parallel life. After moving to Los Angeles, Sly's home turned into a fortress of bodyguards, guns, and non-stop parties, and his dependence on cocaine and PCP deepened. Recording slowed shows started late or didn't happen at all, and band relationships fractured under the weight of paranoia and excess. The turning point that locked in his downfall came when police raided his mansion and later stopped him in drug-related incidents, finding hard drugs and weapons and confirming every rumor about his lifestyle. In the eyes of labels and promoters, the genius who once delivered hits on time had become a dangerously unreliable bet, and the phone stopped ringing. From there, the decline was long but unmistakable. Sly and the Family Stone effectively fell apart by the mid-1970s, and his solo albums never recaptured the creative or commercial heights of Stand or There's a Riot Going On. Legal troubles, financial problems, and stories of him drifting into near homelessness replaced tales of groundbreaking concerts. In the larger story of 21 black R&B legends who ruined their careers in seconds, Sly Stone stands as the funk revolutionary whose split-second choices, skipping gigs, chasing another high, letting drugs and guns define his image, took a once unshakable legacy and turned it into one of music's most painful what-ifs. Bobby Womack. Bobby Womack's life reads like a soul record that suddenly jumps the groove. Before the scandal, he was the gifted kid guitarist in Sam Cooke's band, then a promising voice with his brothers in the Valentinos, blessed with Cooke's mentorship and industry protection. Hits like Looking for a Love and It's All Over Now, later covered by the Rolling Stones, marked him as a rising black R&B force with a raw, church-soaked voice and sharp songwriting instincts. In another timeline, that foundation might have carried him smoothly into long-term stardom. But in the mid-1960s, one decision detonated his reputation almost overnight and marked him for years as the villain of his own story. In December 1964, Sam Cooke was shot and killed. Just about 3 months later, Bobby Womack married Cooke's widow, Barbara Campbell, and even appeared in public wearing Sam's suits. To a mourning black community that revered Cooke as a martyr of soul and civil rights, this looked less like love and more like betrayal. Fans hurled abuse and objects at Bobby during shows, DJs cooled on his records, and many musicians quietly turned away. The moment news of that marriage hit Jet and other outlets, years of goodwill vanished in a flash. He wasn't just Bobby Womack the talent anymore, he was the young protege who in the public eye had moved into his mentor's home and life with shocking speed. The fallout never fully left him, though he later clawed back critical respect with songs like Across 110th Street and If You Think You're Lonely. Now his personal life stayed turbulent, marked by heavy cocaine use, the breakdown of his marriage to Barbara after an affair with her daughter, and persistent stories of chaos and self-sabotage. In the wider saga of 21 black R&B legends who ruined their careers in seconds, Bobby Womack stands as the man whose choice at the altar and the image it created cast a shadow over every brilliant note he sang afterward. Wilson Pickett. Wilson Pickett was the very definition of raw, unstoppable soul. Nicknamed Wicked Pickett, he tore through the 1960s with In the Midnight Hour. Mustang Sally Land of 1,000 dances and more than 50 R&B chart entries, his shouting tenor and ferocious energy helping to shape the sound of Southern soul. On stage, he was fire in a tailored suit, In the studio, he was a hit machine for Atlantic Records, recording in legendary rooms in Memphis and Muscle Shoals. For a time, it seemed that nothing could shake his place in black music history. He had the voice, the songs, and a reputation as one of the most exciting performers in the world. Off stage, though, another story was unfolding. As the hits slowed in the 1970s, Pickett's battles with alcohol and cocaine escalated. The first clear crack in his public image came in 1984 when he was arrested outside a New Jersey bar with a loaded shotgun in his car and later convicted, receiving probation and a fine. In 1991, he was arrested again after drunkenly driving his vehicle across the lawn of his neighbor, who happened to be the mayor of Englewood, New Jersey, while shouting threats. The man, once known for electrifying stages, was now appearing in headlines for late-night chaos and weapons charges, and each story pushed the spotlight a little farther away from his music. The truly devastating blow arrived in 1992 when Pickett, driving drunk in Englewood, struck an 86-year-old pedestrian who later died. He ultimately pleaded guilty to drunk driving charges and served time in jail, followed by probation and mandated treatment. Additional arrests, including a mid-1990s assault and cocaine possession case, reinforced the image of a legend consumed by his own habits rather than his art. In the tale of 21 black R&B legends who ruined their careers in seconds, Wilson Pickett's fall shows how a few reckless, intoxicated decisions on ordinary streets can overshadow a decade of extraordinary music. Donny Hathaway. Donny Hathaway was a celestial force in soul and R&B, a singer, pianist, and arranger whose voice seemed to carry the weight of every prayer and every heartbreak at once. With songs like The Ghetto, Someday We'll All Be Free, and the now classic holiday staple, this Christmas he built a reputation as an artist's artist, deeply musical, spiritually intense, and endlessly influential. His duets with Roberta Flack especially, Where Is the Love and The Closer I Get to You, proved he could move seamlessly between intimate jazz-tinged soul and radio-dominating hits. For black audiences in particular, Hathaway represented a rare kind of genius, technically brilliant, emotionally honest, and unapologetically rooted in church and community. Behind that brilliance, however, his life was being torn apart by severe mental illness. In the early 1970s, at the very height of his career, Hathaway began experiencing terrifying delusions and mood swings and was eventually diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Hospitalizations, heavy medication, and episodes of paranoia made touring and recording increasingly difficult. Sessions would start beautifully, then derail when the illness took over. Colleagues, including Roberta Flack, loved and respected him but struggled to work around his unpredictable breaks from reality. The industry, always hungry for reliability, slowly backed away from one of its brightest lights, not because the talent was gone, but because the cost of accessing it grew painfully high. The seconds that locked Donny Hathaway's story in tragedy came on January 13, 1979, in New York City. After behaving erratically during a day of recording, he returned to his room at the Essex House Hotel. Hours later, he was found on the sidewalk below his 15th floor balcony. His death officially ruled a suicide. In that instant, any hope of a stabilized comeback vanished, and the narrative shifted from troubled genius to lost legend. Within the wider frame of 21 black R&B legends who ruined their careers in seconds, Donny Hathaway's case is uniquely cruel. It was not drugs or scandal that ended his journey, but an illness powerful enough to silence one of the most extraordinary voices soul music has ever known. Arthur Conley. Arthur Conley's rise to fame was almost cinematic. Born in Georgia and mentored by the legendary Otis Redding, he broke through in 1967 with the jubilant hit Sweet Soul Music, a celebration of the entire R&B movement. His voice was bright and powerful, his energy magnetic, and his future seemed limitless. For a brief moment, Conley stood as one of the new faces of Southern soul, carrying the torch of Otis's musical vision to a new generation. But success came quickly, and with it came the darker shadows of fame pressures, personal demons, and the unrelenting pace of the 1960s soul circuit. After Redding's tragic plane crash later that same year, Conley's foundation began to crack. He fell into heavy drinking, drug use, and erratic behavior that alienated managers, promoters, and record executives. Stories circulated of missed shows, slurred performances, and clashes with his label, Atco Records. The once promising young artist began to appear unreliable, and the press turned on him, labeling him a lost talent. The industry that had celebrated his rise was now quietly closing its doors. In the music business, momentum is everything, and Conley's began to vanish with alarming speed. By the early 1970s, Arthur Conley's career in America was effectively over. Unable to escape the stigma of addiction, grief, and professional collapse, he made a radical decision. He left the United States entirely. Settling in the Netherlands, he changed his name to Lee Roberts and lived a quieter, more private life, performing occasionally, but never regaining his former fame. When he died in 2003 at the age of 57, the world remembered him mostly for one perfect song and a flash of brilliance that faded too soon. In the story of 21 black R&B legends who ruined their careers in seconds, Arthur Conley's downfall is both quiet and tragic, a talent undone not by scandal, but by the relentless weight of loss and escape. Rick James. Rick James was the wild electric king of punk funk, a man who turned excess into an entire aesthetic. With hits like Super Freak, Give It To Me Baby, and Mary Jane, he ruled the late 1970s and early 1980s, blending rock, funk, and R&B into something loud, sexual, and completely unmistakable. He lived exactly the way his records sounded. Huge mansions, non-stop, parties, drugs everywhere, women, money, and a band always ready to hit the stage. For a while it worked. He was a symbol of outrageous freedom, a black R&B star who seemed untouchable and proudly out of control. But the lifestyle that powered his image eventually swallowed the man. Cocaine wasn't just a casual habit for Rick James. It became the engine of his days and nights, warping his sense of limits and consequence. In 1991, that spiral crossed a line that would define the rest of his life. James and his then-girlfriend were accused of holding a young woman captive for days in his Los Angeles home, beating her and forcing her to smoke crack. A second incident involving another woman followed not long after. Those weren't just tabloid stories, they were criminal cases that stripped away the playful super freak mask and exposed something far darker behind the persona. In 1993, Rick James was convicted of assault and imprisonment charges related to those attacks and sentenced to a term of just over 5 years in prison. In a few moments in court, decades of carefully built stardom flipped into a permanent criminal record. He served roughly 2 years before being paroled, but the version of Rick James that returned to the world was no longer a chart-topping icon. Radio-cooled labels backed away and public memory shifted from the music to the mugshots. When he died in 2004 from heart failure with drugs present in his system, his story settled into the larger tragedy of 21 black R&B legends who ruined their careers in seconds, living proof that the same excess that once made him fascinating eventually pushed him over a line he could never come back from. Clyde McPhatter. Clyde McPhatter was one of the first great voices of R&B, a soaring tenor who helped shape the entire sound of the 1950s. As lead singer of Billy Ward and the Dominoes, then founder and frontman of the Drifters, he turned songs like Money Honey and Such a Night into blueprints for rock and soul. His tone was bright, but aching, gliding effortlessly over harmonies that countless groups would later imitate. For a while, the formula looked perfect: hit records, screaming audiences, and a reputation as the man other singers secretly tried to sound like. Yet even at his peak, Clyde was wrestling with brutal contracts, racism, and the crushing reality that the big money wasn't reaching the artist whose voice was selling the records. Those frustrations, combined with a naturally shy, sensitive temperament, pushed him toward the bottle. As the years wore on, alcohol stopped being a comfort and started becoming a curse. McPhatter's reliability slipped. Some nights he was brilliant. Other nights he appeared on stage drunk or didn't show at all. In an industry obsessed with the next star, that kind of inconsistency is deadly. A few disastrous performances and ugly backstage scenes convinced promoters and labels that he was too much of a gamble. In a sense, the seconds that ruined his career weren't just one headline-making scandal, but those moments when he stumbled through songs. Crowds expected him to soar on, turning admiration into quiet disappointment. By the late 1960s, Clyde McPhatter, once one of the most imitated voices in R&B, was working small clubs battling serious health problems brought on by years of hard drinking. He died in 1972 at just 39, his liver and heart worn out long before their time. In the story of 21 black R&B legends who ruined their careers in seconds, his tragedy isn't about crime or sensational scandal. It's about how a few public flashes of weakness repeated often enough can erase a groundbreaking legacy in an industry that rarely looks back. Dee Harvey. Dee Harvey's story is one of talent overtaken by chaos, a reminder that promise alone can't survive without stability. Emerging from Chicago's vibrant R&B scene in the early 1980s, Harvey began his career as a gifted background vocalist for the legendary Patti LaBelle before stepping forward with his own solo ambitions. His voice was strong, expressive, and full of gospel fire, the kind of tone that could have carved a real place for him among the era's rising stars. For a while, it looked as if he might do just that, winning attention from radio programmers and producers eager to find the next breakout male soul singer. But as pressure mounted and younger competition filled the charts, Harvey's career began to wobble. Management issues, creative frustration, and the temptations that haunted so many artists of the time started to pull him under. Cocaine and alcohol crept from the sidelines to the center of his life. The pivotal moment came in 1987 when a routine police stop on Chicago's South Side turned public. Officers found cocaine and an open bottle of liquor in his car. Instead of calmly accepting the situation, Harvey reportedly shouted and argued, turning a minor arrest into a spectacle. Within days, local papers and music magazines carried the story, transforming him from a promising name into a cautionary headline. That one night marked the beginning of the end. Labels quickly dropped him, promoters backed out, and fans who had once seen potential now saw only scandal. He faded from the charts and the stages that once seemed within reach, his career collapsing as fast as it had started. When Dee Harvey died in 2012 at just 47, he was remembered not for a long list of hits, but for the wasted potential of a voice silenced too soon. In the story of 21 black R&B legends who ruined their careers in seconds, his downfall is one of the quieter tragedies, the sound of opportunity slipping through a man's own trembling hands. Chuck Woolery. Chuck Woolery's name might be more familiar today from television, but long before he was a game show host, he was a young R&B and pop hopeful chasing a dream in the 1960s. As the charismatic lead singer of the avant-garde Woolery broke into the charts with the 1968 hit Naturally Stoned. The song's mellow harmonies and soulful optimism made it a perfect reflection of the late 60s crossover between R&B pop and psychedelic folk. With his good looks, strong voice, and the promise of more hits ahead, Woolery seemed destined to climb higher in the music world. For a brief moment, the spotlight was his, and the next step looked certain, until one night changed everything. Caught in the party culture of the time, Woolery began drinking heavily, celebrating success with the same recklessness that had undone many young stars before him. Late one night in 1968, after an all-night celebration in Los Angeles, he made a fateful choice to drive home under the influence. Speeding through the city streets in his Mustang at nearly 80 miles per hour, he lost control and slammed into a pole. The crash left him with serious head and leg injuries, but its deeper damage was to his reputation. The press reported the incident widely, casting him as another talented musician wrecked by alcohol and recklessness. That image stuck instantly, the rising R&B voice who nearly killed himself behind the wheel. The fallout was swift and irreversible. His record label quietly dropped him, radio interest cooled, and his momentum as a singer vanished overnight. Though Chuck Woolery would later reinvent himself successfully on television with shows like Wheel of Fortune and Love Connection, his brief music career effectively ended in those few disastrous seconds of drunken speed and steel. In the broader story of 21 black R&B legends who ruined their careers in seconds, his tale stands as a rare one. Not about scandal or addiction's long decay, but about how a single reckless act on the road can erase a lifetime of artistic promise. R. Kelly. R. Kelly's fall may be the most definitive in any story about black R&B legends who ruined their careers in seconds. For decades, he was hailed as the king of R&B, the man behind I Believe I Can Fly, Ignition, Remix, Bump and Grind, and countless hits he wrote for himself and others. His songs dominated radio-filled school gyms and weddings and shaped the sound of 1990s and 2000s R&B. But while the world sang along, a darker narrative was building for years. Women and girls accused him of abuse manipulation and exploitation. Rumors, lawsuits, and leaked tapes followed him. Yet he seemed to dodge lasting consequences, continuing to chart and tour as if nothing could touch him. That illusion shattered in a matter of courtroom seconds. In 2021, after a 6-week federal trial in New York, a jury found R. Kelly guilty of racketeering and multiple sex trafficking-related charges. In 2022, he was sentenced to 30 years in prison. In that single moment when the word guilty was read out and the sentence announced, his career image and cultural standing collapsed. Radio stations removed his music from rotation, public campaigns called for boycotts, and collaborators rushed to distance themselves. The man whose songs once symbolized aspiration and romance became almost overnight a global symbol of predation and abuse. His legal troubles deepened when a federal jury in Chicago later convicted him on child pornography and enticement charges, leading to another lengthy sentence to be served largely alongside his New York term. Now, instead of planning tours or studio sessions, R. Kelly is serving what is effectively a decades-long federal prison stretch. In the wider saga of 21 black R&B legends who ruined their careers in seconds, his story is the clearest example of how years of predatory behavior can finally crash down in one decisive verdict, erasing a towering musical legacy beneath the weight of his crimes. Casey Haley. Casey Haley was once the pure sound of 90s R&B glory. As the explosive lead voice of Jodeci and one half of K-Thai and JoJo, he turned songs like Forever My Lady, Come and Talk to Me, and All My Life into anthems that defined a generation. His gritty, church-raised tenor could plead, growl, and soar in a single line, and for a while it seemed like nothing could slow him down. Platinum albums, sold-out tours, awards, and a high-profile relationship with Mary J. Blige all fed the image of a superstar living at full volume. On stage, he was a storm in a leather jacket. Offstage, the pressure and pain he carried were much harder to see. Behind the scenes, K-Ci was fighting a long, brutal war with alcohol. The party that once looked like part of the job slowly became the job. As the 1990s turned into the 2000s, fans began to notice cracks. Sloppier performances missed notes. Tension with his brother JoJo, and a relationship with Mary that she would later describe as toxic and abusive, fueled by drugs, jealousy, and emotional volatility. The same intensity that made his love songs so believable was tearing his personal life apart. When reality shows and interviews started capturing him slurring, stumbling, or clearly under the influence, those few minutes of footage spread faster than any single rewriting his image from soulful heartthrob to tragic cautionary tale. For K-Ci, the seconds that nearly ruined his career weren't just one night, but those viral moments when the world finally saw the addiction he'd been hiding. Promoters grew wary. Tours faltered, and fans who had grown up with his music watched him become a symbol of how fame, trauma, and substance abuse can collide. In the larger story of 21 black R&B legends who ruined their careers in seconds, Casey Haley stands as the gifted frontman whose raw voice moved millions until the demons he tried to drown in alcohol almost silenced him for good. D'Angelo. D'Angelo's rise felt like the rebirth of soul itself. With Brown Sugar in 1995 and Voodoo in 2000, he became the quiet architect of neo-soul blending, Marvin Gaye's sensuality, Prince's daring and gospel roots into something entirely his own. His voice was smoky and intimate, his musicianship immaculate, and his image especially in the untitled How Does It Feel? Video turned him into a reluctant sex symbol. For a moment, he seemed untouchable, acclaimed by critics, adored by fans, and placed at the center of a new wave of black R&B artistry that prized depth over disposable radio trends. But the spotlight that crowned him also began to crush him. The pressure to stay perfect, to keep the sculpted body, the genius-level music, the myth of effortless cool, fed a growing dependence on alcohol and drugs. Plans for follow-up projects stalled as his personal life unraveled. Then, in January 2005, everything spilled into public view. D'Angelo was arrested in Richmond, Virginia, and charged with DUI, marijuana, and cocaine possession. Later that year, just a week after receiving a suspended sentence on the cocaine charge, he was critically injured in a Hummer crash outside Richmond when the vehicle veered off the road and hit a fence, throwing him from the car. Those two incidents, only months apart, froze his downward spiral in a pair of unforgettable images: the bloated mugshot and the wrecked SUV. After 2005, D'Angelo vanished from the mainstream, his career on hold for nearly a decade, while he wrestled with addiction recovery and the ghost of his own legend. When he finally returned with Black Messiah in 2014, critics hailed it as a masterpiece. But the long silence had already etched his name onto any list of 21 black R&B legends who ruined their careers in seconds. His story shows how a few bad choices behind the wheel under the influence can turn a once-in-a-generation talent into a cautionary tale about the price of perfection and the fragility of genius. Sisqó. Sisqó's career burned bright and fast, a perfect reflection of the flashy late 90s R&B era he helped define. As the platinum-haired frontman of Dru Hill and the solo artist behind the global smash thong song 1999, he became an instant icon, bold, energetic, and unmistakably confident. His stage presence, acrobatic dance moves, and smooth falsetto made him one of the most recognizable voices in modern R&B. By the age of 22, he was performing for sold-out arenas, topping the Billboard charts, and living the fantasy most singers only dream of. But behind the fame, the same intensity that powered his performances was quietly pushing him towards self-destruction. After the success of his debut album, Unleash the Dragon, Sisqó faced the immense pressure of following up a cultural phenomenon. The non-stop touring media attention and internal conflicts within Dru Hill took their toll. Rumors of erratic behavior and ego clashes began to circulate, while his reputation for partying grew louder than the music itself. The defining moment came in December 2000 at a Baltimore nightclub, where a heated argument reportedly turned violent. Witnesses described a drunken brawl that ended with police involvement and an arrest. In a few chaotic minutes, the golden image of the thong song star shattered, replaced by headlines that painted him as reckless and volatile. That night marked the turning point. Record labels cooled, planned projects stalled, and his once endless media visibility evaporated. Though Sisqó released more music later, including Return of Dragon and reunion tours with Dru Hill, he never regained his former dominance. The man who had turned playful sensuality into a global anthem became a cautionary tale about how ego excess and one public outburst can halt even the most dazzling career. In the chronicle of 21 black R&B legends who ruined their careers in seconds, Sisqó's story is a flash of light extinguished by the very fame that once made him shine. Jaheim. Jaheim once represented a classic R&B dream. A rough upbringing in New Jersey, a rich baritone that cut straight through the mix, and a debut album, Ghetto Love 2001, that went platinum and put his name firmly on the urban charts. Follow-ups like Still Ghetto and Ghetto Classics gave him radio staples such as Put That Woman First, and by the mid-2000s, he'd sold millions of records and earned multiple Grammy nominations. For many fans, he was the voice of street soul romance, real stories, real pain, dressed in sharp suits and delivered over lush grown-folk production. On paper, Jaheim had everything he needed for a long-respected R&B career. But as the hits slowed and the spotlight shifted, his public image took a darker turn. The most devastating blow came on September 6, 2021, when police responding to a report of a puppy in distress at his Hillsborough, New Jersey home found 15 dogs in deplorable condition. 6 were in crates outside one so unresponsive it had to be euthanized. 9 more inside were described as emaciated and without food or water. Jaheim was arrested and charged with third-degree animal cruelty and failure to provide necessary care. The story and the grim photos spread quickly. For an artist whose biggest hit urged men to put that woman first, the image of neglected animals on his property clashed violently with everything his music seemed to stand for. In the years since, the situation has only worsened. Coverage of Jaheim is now less about new albums and more about repeated animal cruelty charges, including fresh counts reported in 2025. While his catalog still means something to longtime fans, the industry's trust has largely evaporated. Tours, major label pushes, and big stage appearances have dried up. In the narrative of 21 black R&B legends who ruined their careers in seconds, Jaheim's downfall shows how a single shocking discovery at home, 15 suffering dogs, 1 dead, can obliterate decades of musical goodwill in an instant. In the end, these 21 black R&B legends remind us that brilliance and self-destruction often travel side by side. One arrest, one violent outburst, one overdose, one horrifying revelation at home. Seconds that can burn away decades of craft struggle and cultural impact. Yet behind every fall is a web of trauma, exploitation, racism, addiction, and an industry that profits from pain, then walks away when it spills into public view. Here at Legends of Black Excellence, we honor the art, but refuse to ignore the cost. So tell me who truly ruined these careers, the artists themselves or the system that fed and abandoned them?